your perception of yourself or your identity or your ego, which is an existential question anyway, actually will not determine what you are able to do in your life. It's your ability, right? And your work ethic. And so, for me, I always have had negative self-conception, but it's not necessarily gotten in the way of me achieving the things that I said. I'm not always successful, but I am always willing to do the work and to do the things and to follow the path and to not make excuses. Sometimes you fail, there's luck, there's timing, there's circumstance, all those things. But certainly in my early days, I operate differently now. But in my early formative years as a professional, you would not outwork me.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Pelaccio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Pelaccio. Today's episode is brought to you by Pelaccio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Seth Deutsch. Seth is the founder of Samson Partners Group, a firm that assists other founders and CEOs in achieving their goals. He also acts as an outside operating partner and deal partner at several mid-market private equity firms. Prior to founding Samson, Seth held executive leadership positions at AECOM, one of the world's largest professional technical services firms, where he was the president and CEO of 2 multi-billion-dollar divisions. Seth has an undergraduate degree from Rice University and an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Seth.
We met through Ryan Sprout at Great Range Capital. I think back in late 2023, I believe. So yeah, Ryan's great. I send a few people his way at times, and they're a private equity firm here in Kansas City, and I know you're on the advisory board. So yeah, it's great to see you again. Very honored that you came. I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but that's what the podcast is about. But your career has been fabulous, and we kind of became, I'll say, at least LinkedIn friends. We met on a virtual call with Great Range Capital. And then I started following you on LinkedIn. We had a bunch of messaging to each other, and we've had a lengthy conversation back in 2024. So yeah, it's great to see you again. You've had unbelievable accomplishments, and I love how you talk about yourself and some kind of your everything from meditation to mental health challenges to being transparent. And I love your kind of coaching and helping others and caring mentality. So with that, and just again, based on past experience, but I ask all the guests, I like to hear their origin story, but where'd you grow up? Sure. And what was fun for you growing up, knowing that I know you had some traumatic childhood experiences. So yeah.
I grew up in a really small town in Ohio, outside of Columbus. And there wasn't a lot of fun in my childhood. My childhood was not anything that I would wish upon anyone. Let's put it like that. But I would say that I was always I think I had a lot of grit, resilience, gift of gab. Always had. I think, in my early, in the ages of, I think in 6th grade, I did my first musical. Now, you'll know that, well, you know this, I'm I used to be 6'8". I'm 6'7" now, but the first role I played was a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz. I did come out on my knees and I sang the "O Coroner, I must have thoroughly examined her" piece. And actually, I think the next year I moved up in the ranks, and I was Bernardo in West Side Story, and then I got the male lead as Baron von Trapp in The Sound of Music, and punished everyone at that time with my rendition of Edelweiss. And it was at that same time, in about 7th, 8th grade, that I started to play basketball. And basketball is really what kind of became the thing that got me out of that life and propelled me forward. And I was at an all boys school at the time. I was on an academic scholarship there, and decided that I wanted to transfer to the local public high school in Newark, Ohio, and learn to be a basketball player and become a champion. We had that team had won something like 18 straight Division I district championships. There ended up being 2 other Division I players on our team, Jeff Quackenbush, who's still coaching there, and Bobby Sellers. And Jeff played at St. Bonaventure. Bobby played at Colorado State. I played at Rice. Wow. So that kind of became that became the path for me, the path to get out. I got injured in high school. I had three surgeries in high school, unfortunately. So that really kind of took my recruiting down. And so I ended up going to Rice. I really wanted to play in the Big East or the Big Ten. But after those injuries, it didn't come to pass. And so I decided to go to the best school I could get into with that was still Division I, and not have to really pay for school. And so ended up going to Rice, and had a great experience. Loved the school. Unfortunately, I ended up getting hurt again. So my freshman year got hurt. Came back from that, and then really hadn't played in about 2.5 years, and started my sophomore year and was kind of going on a tear. And then my knees went bad again. So I made it through that season. And then after having 9 surgeries between the ages of 16 and 19, had to hang it up, which is a good thing. I should have been a football player. But then I'd have all types of other injuries and types of the other stuff. But I played at like 285 pounds, 6'8", 285. Wow. I was a big dude. And, but anyway, and then that's when I started to coach. So I coached for 2 years as a student assistant. And then, my vision was to always to play professionally, probably in Europe or something like that for a few years, and then become a college basketball coach. That's what I always wanted to do. And so I was a full-time assistant at Rice after I graduated. And I just needed to emotionally get away from the game. Like this whole thing really hadn't worked out the way I'd planned, and I still really wanted to play, and had a lot of anger and bitterness over what had happened. This happens to a lot of athletes. That many athletes have their careers ended early. I'm not unique in that regard, but I needed to move away from the sport. But becoming a coach is still, it's part of it's my DNA. The thing that I still kind of think, that's how I think about myself still today. And I think it's how I've always carried myself. When you're a teacher and a coach, you're a teacher and a coach. That's part of your DNA. I just had to figure out how to manifest that in the world of work. And so anyway, that was kind of my origin. And then I had to go figure out how to be something other than a basketball coach.
I know from past conversations, you're a big workout guy. I mean, did you have that type of discipline? I mean, it's one thing to have it later on, but if you're doing it in high school, did it start there? And who was kind of your kind of role model at the time, if you had one?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, once I decided to be an athlete, like a lot of things that I do, when I decide I'm going to go do something, I commit myself to it. I commit myself to the process. I can compartmentalize really well and give myself over to be shaped and molded, right? Especially when you don't know you don't know the path. You're 13 years old and you make the decision, this is what I'm going to go do with my life. Like, this is what I'm going to go do. And I made the decision to switch schools and to go pursue excellence. And so, that was, now I had no coordination. I had no skill. Like I hadn't started playing a sport till I was 11. So I was kind of, and I was very uncoordinated. I grew to this, I think I was this height by the time I was 14, 15, right? So I grew pretty early and coming into my body and everything, and just hadn't played organized sports. And so, that first year, I would be in the gym every morning at 6 a.m. Doing dot drills, coordination drills, just learning the foundations, learning how to manage my body, learning how to get balance, learning how to catch the ball, developing all these, developing this stuff, gym. There was no gym class for me during gym class. It was conditioning drills, dot drills, agility drills. After school, it was, weightlifting. It was skill work. It was development work. And so, I just committed myself I put myself in their hands. We actually had a strength and conditioning coach back at New York in those days. Right. And so, it just became part of my routine. Now, after all the injuries I had, in my life, part of what enables me to, like, people wouldn't know, like me walking down the street, that I've had, 2 back surgeries and have scoliosis and I've had, 6 knee surgeries and all this stuff. But I've tried to keep myself strong. I do a lot of different types of functional training now because I travel so much. Right. And I want to remain healthy, but work, it's also because of my trauma. I've got I always have a chip on my shoulder. I always think I'm not good enough. I'm not deserving. I'm always coming from behind. I had a period of time in my very early childhood development where I missed a lot of school because of what my early life was like. And so, I've always, had a fear and a belief that I was inadequate, wasn't enough. And I would also say that in some cases that might have, resulted in some overtraining, if I'm quite honest, right? And some overwork during, parts of my life that I've learned how to balance. But, for me, it's all about what is it that you want to achieve? Where are you starting from? And what will it take to get there? And there's a psychologist who's also a neuroscientist, Robert Fritz, whose work I really like. He wrote The Path of Least Resistance in 1984. Wrote another book about really the act of creation in between his final book in 2016, which is Identity. And it's really interesting to see how his work transformed over that period. But in Identity, basically, Fritz says identity is actually the issue. Identity gets in the way. There are only 4 paradigms for what you manifest in your life, and it's positive self-conception, positive ability; negative self-conception, positive ability; positive self-conception, negative ability; negative self-conception, negative ability. Your perception of yourself, or your identity, or your ego, which is an existential question anyway, actually will not determine what you are able to do in your life. It's your ability, right? And your work ethic. And so, for me, I always have had negative self-conception, but it's not necessarily gotten in the way of me achieving the things that I said. I'm not always successful, but I am always willing to do the work and to do the things and to follow the path and to not make excuses. Sometimes you fail, there's luck, there's timing, there's circumstance, all those things. But certainly in my early days, I operate differently now. But in my early formative years as a professional, you would not outwork me. That wasn't necessarily healthy.
Yeah, you could have too much grit.
But too much. Oh yeah, you can be way too gritty, way too edgy, et cetera. But the work, putting in the work, learning, putting in the reps, developing myself, treating failure as a lesson, because there are very few teams that ever go undefeated on their way to a championship. But really taking that athletic mindset and saying that failure is we learn through failure, and it helps us get better. And so setbacks, obstacles, there's a Zen saying, the obstacles are the path.
Yeah.
Right. So I've always had a mindset like it's become refined over the years, and how I operate in the world has become significantly refined. But, putting in the work was never an issue.
It's like the great Dean Smith, coach of North Carolina for many years, one of the best coaches of all time, said, if you live and die by, wins and losses, you're going to die a lot, so. But talk about a little bit, because I mean, I don't know what your childhood was like, obviously, and you don't know what mine's like, but I had I definitely had self-esteem issues growing up, even though, I was successful in sports. Did great academically, but I did have low self-esteem. And it's one thing that, have that chip on your shoulder, but when you don't have confidence in yourself and all that. But I mean, and I know you have a tremendous work ethic, but I mean, you led your career, you led teams in over 80 countries. You've acquired 70 plus companies.
Yeah.
You've been in 4 exits. You've operated businesses, business divisions from 25 million to 2 billion, the B word. And so, I mean, how did you translate that into that success with having that chip on your shoulder and having low confidence in yourself? And obviously, you're not, 5'8". You're 6'8", probably in your 20s or 30s. So you're a big presence, and you got a booming voice and all that. So talk about all that.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I look at the stuff, and some of it doesn't seem real. It's real. It just doesn't seem real. I don't know how I did it. I mean, I think that, and I don't think of any of it as success, quite honestly. I know, like, we have to talk about ourselves a certain way in marketing or on LinkedIn or whatever, right? In your resume, whatever. I just think I've been really blessed to, I can't believe that from where I come from, and, I have a severe, I have a disability. Actually, I have a neurological condition that's caused from trauma called complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I also have ADHD, but most people that have my condition are not able to function well in society. Most can't work, don't have marriages, can't maintain relationships, high suicide rate. By grace of God, I am able to do these things. It's also part of just, my nature as a coach and a teacher, which is my true nature, that, I've always felt that it's never been about me. It's been about the team. It's been about others. I think that's also just because of my nature, what's helped me to do things, because it hasn't really come from a self-serving place. It's not my core. It doesn't necessarily make me the best business person in the world. And I think the coaching mentality, when I moved from playing to coaching, especially in athletics, you cannot step onto the field of play. Everything you do has to be done through others. That's a really interesting position, right, to be in. And it's not that you're not player coach in business, but I think it really shaped my mentality and how I approach things and how I build teams. I don't know, and I've changed a lot. I've been working a lot on myself the last few years to change some of my false beliefs, to do some neurological rewiring. But, what I would say is that I think the thing that sustained me was that we always had a vision that was compelling. I'm a very good logical, planned, strategic thinker. My undergraduate work is in war studies. And so I end up applying a lot of that type of technique and theory about, what is the game we're playing? Where are we entering the game? Who are the like the whole things we call SWOT analysis. I'm trained in multivariate analysis, in complex situations. And, I understand constraint theory very well. I don't actually allow for unconstrained strategy in any of my businesses, because we always have constraints. And actually, I think constraints bring out the best ideas, right? So we are always limited by time, talent, and money. Every company is limited by that. And so I think the best creativity comes out of those constraints, right? How do you make the most of this? How do you get to where you want to go with the resources? We can't pretend like we got a magic wand and we can make things. Let's live in reality and go set out to do cool things that inspire us and that we all want to achieve. And so I think part of the way that I've, a lot of the core members of my team are first generation immigrants, are also trauma survivors of different types of trauma, tend to be military veterans, especially special forces, tend to be former college athletes. So many of the people that I surround myself on my core leadership teams come from, similar backgrounds to mine. It means that we know how to sacrifice. We know how to put team first. We know how to role play. We know how to manage time. We know how to prioritize and sequence. I think it's because of that thinking and the way that I build teams, I can't take credit for anything. It's all really because of the team.
Go back a little bit, just because you mentioned it, but you picked international studies, political science, and that included kind of war simulation, game theory as a major at Rice. So, why did you pick that out of all the majors you can choose from?
I was not planning on going into business. Remind you, what was my plan?
Yeah.
Play in college, play professionally, be a coach. It interested me. I actually had a friend, Gerard Bassantini, growing up, who worked for the CIA. And I had always been interested in I'm way too big for field work, but I had always been interested in being an analyst. And so I was one of the first graduates of the Baker School of Public Policy at Rice. And that was actually a career path that I contemplated a number of times until actually there's one of the people on my team, my core business partner, Jordan, and I both flunked out of the interview process at the CIA because we were both told we were too independent minded and wouldn't follow directions. Right. They're right. So it fascinated me. I think that way of thinking has served me well. The other stuff I had to pick up as I went along. I did end up going back to business school and all that stuff, but you don't really learn business, I think, until you run a business. And when I say run a business, I mean the whole kit and caboodle and managing cash and covenants and debt and all that other stuff. Running a P&L at a Fortune 500 company is much, much different than actually running a let's say a private equity backed or a private enterprise where you got to do everything. So it was interesting. So when I decided to stop playing basketball, I had to figure out what to do. And I actually ended up taking a job at an oil and gas company in Houston called Apache Oil and Gas Company. And I went into a rotational program there, got to work on communications, strategy, M&A, a whole bunch of stuff. Actually, the first deal I was a part of, we were acquiring all the assets from Shell. So Apache bought the onshore assets of Shell Canada, and I had to go up to a frozen ice strip to inspect a gas plant in the Northwest Territory in House Mountain, Canada. That was really interesting. And and while we were doing all this stuff, and I was just roving around and learning, we were dealing with M&A integration and all that stuff, and so many of my friends were going. This is in the .com era and all that stuff, and many of my friends were going into technology, and they're like, "What are you doing working for an oil and gas company?" Now I'll tell you, man, if I would have just stayed, I didn't know what stock options were at the time, but I was given the equivalent of my salary in stock options if I stayed every year. And I think at the time, I can't remember, our stock was under $10 a share. And within, I think, 4 years of me leaving, it's probably because I left. I think the stock went to 100, then it split, then went to 100 because Apache was the first one doing fracture stimulation technology in the Permian Basin and stuff. But anyway, I didn't know it was. But anyway, I got interested in technology.
No, I said interesting. I mean, how did you you were going to be a coach, but then how did you get the job at Apache? Was it just happenstance or?
Oh shit! Oh my gosh! It's funny. I don't know. This is back. I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Like most 23-year-olds.
I got no idea, but you're a young kid, you don't know shit, but you got a work ethic. I've got an intellect, and I was an athlete. All that is to say that someone took a chance on me. That's all, right? Someone took a chance on a young kid that had potential, right? Although I remember when I was first told I had potential when I was 11 years old and I played basketball for the first time. All they meant was you're tall. But but in any case, I was responding to ads in the Houston Chronicle. Honestly, I didn't know anything about networking. I squandered all my networking. Everything I teach my nephew how to do, who's at Dartmouth now. It's like the stuff I wish someone would have told me to do. But I was finding my way. And I was just responding to ads, and I got an interview at Apache, and I went in, and they made me take a bunch of tests and stuff, and they were just impressed with just the way that I thought and the way that I held myself, and they gave me a job.
Yeah.
And so that's where it started, and then as I was there, I got interested in technology. one of our technology providers saw something in me and recruited me to come join them. And I went to a software company in the identity management and security space. And I had some interesting sliding glass door moments with, that as well. So I went to this company, Business Layers, startup in the identity management and security space. They let me take on channel sales, international sales, corp dev. I don't know. They're like, hey, you've done some stuff. And like, I don't know. So I did all that. And I got us into a number of partnerships. One of those partnerships was with a company called Netegrity that private labeled our software. They ended up acquiring us, and then they got acquired by Computer Associates. So when that happened, two of my classmates from Rice had gone on. They worked for a few years, like a lot of kids do, and then they went to business school. And so I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to go to business school. And I got a call from one of our competitors at that company, a company called Waveset, which had been started by Mark McLean, who's now running SailPoint, and Kevin Cunningham, Chris Ostertag, Marty Fredrickson, all the guys from the Tivoli days. And they were deep into the identity. And they called me because I had won this deal with Schlumberger away from them. And I remember the conversation with Chris and Michael Dia. They're like, hey, we hear you're going back to business school. You probably don't know if you're lucky or good at this whole thing. Why don't you come here and we'll make you good? That spoke to me. And I'm like, all right, this is interesting. And so I went to work for those guys, and I did a lot of the same stuff. And with Michael was running corp dev and international, and we ended up getting the company into a bidding war with HP, Oracle, Sun, and Microsoft at the time. Ended up selling the business to Sun Microsystems. And then I signed a 3-year retention package, and I initially took over running all of Asia for the identity management and security business. And then I took over basically rest of world, everything outside of North America and Latin America while I was there. I had an interesting decision to make. I'd met my wife at a bar up in Columbus when I was back dealing with some family issues, living in Houston. And I had this interesting choice to make, which was to go join a dear friend of mine, Andre Durand, move to Denver and continue my career path in the identity management and security space, or try to create a career in the Midwest, moving back up to Columbus. And then, my wife was going to be, and she ended up being very centered in the Midwest. And Sun had paid for me to go to business school. And so it's like, do we want to live apart, have two homes, and I'm living in Denver and she's in Columbus or Cincinnati and I'm pursuing this career? Or do I need to make a pivot if I want to be able to live in the same region or the same city and work? And so I decided to make a pivot. I decided to go into the industrial end markets, and I leveraged the fact that I was, at business school to do that when I was 30, and went to work for Eden. And that's where I learned how to really run businesses. And what was really, it's interesting. I took a 70% pay cut to go do that because I decided that I wanted to, I was going to go into the industrial sector. My wife's going to be working in places like Cincinnati or Milwaukee or, Detroit, et cetera. Let me go into industrial manufacturing. I'll figure it out. And so I went to work at Eden, initially in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I'm on a board today in the truck parts group, which ended up merging with an automotive group. Initially running an aftermarket truck parts remanufacturing business, doing a turnaround of that business. And that's where I learned how to run businesses. That's where I learned the Eden business system, et cetera. So I was doing a series of turnarounds there, and I'm this entrepreneur, this software kid, now living in Kalamazoo, working for a very old world company. It was the worst cultural fit you could have ever imagined because I just can't fit into a box. But I tried as hard as I could, and then what ended up happening was they needed to Edenize me, and so I was doing this restructuring of a business in China. And we just solved that. And as part of that, I needed an infrastructure partner because we were very early into hybrid electric and electric vehicles. We were building them for cities, bus fleets, et cetera. I needed an infrastructure partner. I got connected with a company called AECOM. And AECOM started to recruit me. And I left Eden to go to work for AECOM. Publicly traded company. They were $8 billion at the time. I went to work for Mike Burke and John Dionisio, Jane Chemlinski, the whole executive team there, initially as the global head of sales for all of AECOM, and then to start an industrial service business for them. And it was that or go get Edenized and go be a plant manager. And because that was like, that's how you got like on the proper path. That pivot was what really led me to everything I do today. I really fell in love with service businesses. It fits me well. And so that's what I did. My wife got relocated to Chicago. AECOM is global, so it didn't matter where I lived. I could be virtual. And for 3 years, I restructured the go-to-market motion and rebuilt kind of the sales engine at AECOM globally, while then starting up this industrial group. And so we started with a really tiny industrial business, doing about 25 million of revenue and a few service lines. And over a 6-year period, organically and inorganically, we developed that into about a $2 billion business with about 10,000 employees and operations in about 80 countries. That team that I worked with at AECOM is on my team today at Samson. They're the foundation of our team. Jordan, who was my first COO there, has been my COO now for 15 years at everywhere I've gone. And she's partner here at our little company. That's kind of what set the stage for everything I did next.
So, Seth, talk about, I mean, again, with all the success and carrying this chip on your shoulder due to, some health issues, both, physical and mental, and you were in a sales role too early on in your career. Like, did you have any mentors that guided you, role models, whether they be just business or sales type mentors or books or anything? It was just you grinding it.
I wish I had a better story for you there. Listen, I was always seeking father figures because of some of my issues growing up and everything. But there were certainly people along the way that I thought might be, but I've really, it's hard to say.
No,
I'm sorry, Jeff.
No need to apologize. It's your story.
Yeah.
Which even makes it more amazing, honestly, that, you kind of found your own way by, listening to your own internal guidance, right?
Yeah, which has been transformed over the last few years. But yes, like I just kind of found my own way. It's funny. It's something my wife and I used to talk about a lot. She was always fascinated that I just kind of figured this out myself, right? And was very self-driven. So I think what it comes from, because of my abuse as a child in the household that I was raised in and what happened to me, I had to grow up very quickly. I had to be the adult. I had to make all my decisions. So you heard me mention a few things, right? Like I made a decision when I was 13. I did this when I was 11. That's because I had to make all the decisions for me. Once I was through a particular period of severe abuse as a child, I basically took control of my life.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Pelaccio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Pelaccio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Pelaccio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
I basically took control of my life at 11. And I knew that I could not trust anyone else in my life as a child to protect me. And if I wanted to make something of my life, it would have to be self-directed.
Yeah. Which is amazing at that early age to really, come to that conclusion. But yeah. So,
and that's what drove it. Listen, I yearned for mentorship and all that other stuff for so long. And then I stopped seeking it. And I really, kind of went inside. and then, spent a number of years kind of, repairing some of that neurology, and getting to a better place that kind of, from where I'm driven now. And I think the other thing for me is, when you come from a place of severe trauma, there are lots of trust issues, which made it very hard for me to, let's say, trust a mentor or people that might have tried. Because when you are so abused by your parents, your sense of safety and trust as an adult, as a child and as an adult, those are very hard things to work on. I've worked on them, in the last few years. You become very self-reliant, and so it's hard. I think part of it is it's hard to build to trust others. And for me, achievement. I don't like to think that I've achieved anything, quite honestly. But Jeff, for me, part of what's just driven me is to get to some point of what I feel, try to create safety. And so I always felt that, through my work ethic and the things that I discovered that I could do as a professional, I could make a living to support myself, to take care of myself, right? To be protected. So achievement for me has always been about the team, but personally, it's really has been anchored in creating safety.
I listened to one podcast. You said, when I was managing teams internationally, Asia, I would stay up from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. to be on their time and have meetings. And so, and I know at some point within the last, I want to say 4-ish years, you took I think you called it a pause period. So talk about that reset and how that, was it just the constant grind from, starting, at Apache right out of school all the way up to all your great achievements at AECOM?
We got to start talking. We got to stop using these words of great achievements. But anyway, it's okay. So what?
The shitty achievements, all the shitty achievements you had, Seth.
All the shitty achievements. Yeah. So I think what happened is I really had an encounter with myself. It's funny. Kevin and I talk about this. Kevin Willis was the first person at Kellogg to suggest to me, because my thinking was I'm going to be like a head of sales, and he kind of suggested to me I should be a CEO, and I'm like, oh, because I really didn't know what I was doing, Jeff, right? So I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll take that goal. Sure, why not? That sounds good. So I set a 15-year goal to do it, and I achieved it and whatever. And coming out of it, I'm like, that didn't really solve anything. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied. My self-conception is still just really, I'm just internally, things look one way on the outside. As you said, I got a deep voice. I'm 6'7". I'm in decent shape, and I've got a fancy title and a nice resume. Things must be, and I got a wonderful wife. That is true. And things must be great. And inside of me, what I did not realize was that I carried a brain injury. Right? I did not realize this because I had never told anyone about my abuse. I'd kept that a secret. And so what happened was I couldn't contain it anymore. I just built and sold E78. I'd taken the company from $1 million to $30 million of EBITDA in whatever, how many years, and did 12 acquisitions and whatever, all this stuff. And just coming up on the 3-year anniversary of this, I had an interaction with my parents, who I no longer am allowed to have any contact with. It broke me. The things they said to me absolutely broke me. And it forced me to come clean about my life and what had happened. And for the first time in my life, I went to see a trauma therapist. And I had started Samson, and I was still, the E78 was one of my first clients, and we've done that work. And I basically, I was on a bunch of boards, and I basically decided to put everything down. And I got my diagnosis. I came to understand what was happening inside of me, that I had the CPTSD, which is a different form of PTSD, that it was causing this strife, and I needed to go heal myself and heal my brain. And so, while Samson has been growing these past few years, it hasn't even been my priority until very recently. And I basically just set myself on a path, the way I've done things in the past, to go heal, my trauma. And so that's what I spent the majority of the last 3 years doing. And somehow, some way, our little company's been growing in the meantime. But and now we're just about to start growing the company intentionally.
From my experience, but I think it happens to a lot of people. I think your 20s are just just trying to get your feet as an adult, professionally, personally, job wise. Your 30s, you're starting to come into your own professionally, and some people get married and have kids, and that's kind of the focus. But then the 40s are like when you really start dealing with this shit from your childhood, I think, and because you're like, now you have time to reflect more, because the 20s and 30s were just go periods. I think that really, because everybody has their childhood shit. It's just, how big is the suitcase, right? I mean,
That's right.
So, you work for all these companies, and then what made you say, hey, now I want to start my own thing. I'm going to start Samson Partners and go on your own.
Yeah, it's funny. I am an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't mean for this to happen. There was a commercial when I was a kid from BASF. We don't make the thing, we make the thing better, was basically the premise. And that's kind of the narrative I had told myself. I can step into someone else's company and really improve this, right? Take it to where it should go. And after I had exited our HVAC business, and I was taking a period of reflection, people were asking me to go on boards. That's why I started the company, to just go on boards. And I found myself back coaching, which was the natural position for me. And, basically what ended up happening inside of me, any textbook will tell you, I'm not necessarily doing this for the right reasons, in the sense of that I didn't have like this idea, I want to go solve this latent need in the market. I think for me, what I discovered is I really like working this way. I've got a bunch of friends that have been with me on my journey that are former CEOs that I think would really share the same ethos. And we really like to take our knowledge and experience, and as opposed to working in one company, work for multiple. And in this way, through whether it's board work, advisory work, et cetera. And I also think for me personally, what I came to realize is that it's just hard to put me in a box. And I don't think I ever felt comfortable truly as someone's employee. That's not rare for any entrepreneur. I just think it took me a while to really figure out who I was, as opposed to trying to fit into some mold, which I tried to do for a very long time. And again, I remind you, I had no intention of ever going into business, right? So it's actually, in a way, I didn't necessarily fit a paradigm anyway. So that's where it started. And it started by my desire truly to help people as a coach, in a way. I don't like to use that term because it has a different kind of connotation than what we actually do in our work in the world of business. But, it's to be that when we're stepping in, let's say, to a board or to help a founder, build and exit their company, it's because everyone on our team has actually done it before. While we are providing a consultative service, everything that the founder or the private equity team, whatever, is trying to do, we've actually done. We've typically done it multiple times, and we've typically made all the mistakes and stepped on all the rakes that they might end up stepping on. If we can make their journey easier, if we can help them through this knowledge and experience, fulfill their potential, fulfill their vision, with having a smoother ride, that seemed like a lot of fun to me. And so that's how it started. And it started with not me seeking this out. It started with people approaching me to be on a board here, board there, help them out. And, we really did not put much intention into this until recently. The company's just kind of evolved. We've got a great team, about 10, 15 people now that do this type of work with me. And what I think about the last few years is really kind of paid R&D. And I think we ended up falling into the latent need, which also then connected with me emotionally, for the first time, I have a passion for my work. And I think it's maybe part of the reason, Jeff, I might be a bit dismissive about what you refer to as accomplishments, because it didn't have much meaning to me personally. And that is an important thing for me as a person whose DNA is a coach and a teacher. That comes with great passion, right? And so, what we really discovered in the work we predominantly do, and where we're really taking the company in the future, and we've got a book coming out called The Owner's Manual. It's out now, but anyway, we've got a second book coming out soon. What I really started to look at was a lot of the companies we work with. What has happened, they're pre-private equity, they're founder-owned companies across multiple industries. And what has happened is they've typically implemented something like EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. They might have implemented something like Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up, whatever it might be. And they've done this incredible job of scaling their business. And they've now elevated off their business. They're being strategic, and they're starting to think. And they're thinking different thoughts. They're thinking a thought like, hey, you know what? I'm 60. This has been great. I'd like to sell my business and be done working. That's a thought. They're thinking, I'd like to become a platform in private equity. I'd like to go do a buy and build. I want to partner with an investor and go achieve this next thing, right? But that they've never done. Whatever it might be, they've made the internal decision that they want to do something with outside capital. They've explored ESOPs, maybe they've explored if they had children or employees, but that's not the path for them for whatever reason. They're deciding to go down this other path. And what we really discover is that a lot of small businesses don't really get, what I refer to as small business with, let's say, under 50 million of revenue, don't get a lot of great advice in terms of then what they need to do to prepare, as opposed to running a business for themselves. That's a fantastic business that's providing them with an incredible lifestyle, and et cetera. But they're not thinking about the business through the investor's lens, which is a very different perspective. And so what we teach, the method that we developed, is to think about your business as if you're thinking about buying a rental property. I know you have to think about it through an investor lens. And if you think about, a property in Kansas City, maybe in some neighborhood, the square foot range is 300 to 500 a foot. And we know the things that drive that valuation gap, things like location, foundation, age of the roof, age of the HVAC equipment, age of the kitchen appliances, the kitchen paint, the flooring, all these things drive this range. Every single private business has a trade range as well in the private markets. And we define this in terms of like a multiple of EBITDA. So it could be 3 times to 6 times. So what are the things that create that valuation gap? It's things like leadership, succession, client concentration, quality of revenue, quality of your financial reporting, quality of your operations, these types of things. And as investors look at a business, you might have a great business that's fantastic for you, and 60% of your revenue comes from one client. All the investor cares about is the predictability of future cash flow. And what they're looking at is, well, that is fantastic for you. You're like, look at this awesome client that I have that gives us all their revenue. The investor is thinking is, well, what happens if they go bankrupt?
Yeah.
Right. And so what we might want to think about doing as we take on this investor view is to say we might want to remodel the business the same way that we would remodel the house before we go to market to achieve the type of exit that we want. This is the work that we do with founders. And what we have done is we have taken all of this talent, people that are 10 times better than me, that have done this time and time again for themselves in private equity. We've extracted them from private equity. We're giving them to the founders. These are the people that private equity talks about bringing in the team to create value with you after the sale. We bring them to you before the sale to help you, the founder, achieve the type of exit that you want. And so we codified all of this into our business system. So like when you think about EOS, right, Traction EOS, ours is Owner's Manual, EVRS, Exit Value Realization System. And so what we've done is the book that we just came out with actually has, not just my words, interviews with 25 executives that have been down this path. Founders who didn't do this and didn't get where they wanted to go, founders that did this properly, investment bankers, private equity groups, all teaching these methods. And then all the tools that we use when we come self-implement, when we come help a company do this, are now available on our website. So my hope, my honest, true hope, is that a founder that is thinking about, for whatever reason, a third-party investment, a sale to private equity, an outside investment, et cetera, they can read the book, download our tools, and self-implement. I'm so happy, because it means that all these years of work actually could mean something to help others. Now, if they need our help, we're here. But that was the whole motivation. This has made everything I've done worth something if we can help other people through this experience. Now, I don't know if I've done a good job of that or not. I'm very ashamed just even putting the book out. It's been a horrible internal struggle for me, because I feel like I won't be able to hide anymore.
Right.
But I just really want to help people.
No, it's so good. I love the name of the book. The Owner's Manual is so good. It's one thing did you ever think you would write a book? I mean, like, how did it what was the whole impetus, and how fast did you do it? And
oh my gosh. So I back in May, I made a decision that, and it's really for my team, and in a way for me, that we've never marketed. Everything we do is word of mouth, reputation, et cetera. To really grow and scale the business, just like any founder we would teach this to, we needed to diversify our revenue channels. We needed to market, et cetera, whatever. But I really decided that I wanted to find a way to bring all of this knowledge to founders in such a way that, again, whether we'll never be able to scale fast enough to work with everyone that could use our help. And so I really wanted to I'm a huge admirer of Gino Wickman. So I really wanted to take a page out of that Traction EOS and said, what if we could we write this in a way that someone could actually read this and take some of the steps? And so I had that thought in May of this year. And so I spent the last months while running the business and taking care of clients in the lab night and day, producing what is now up. And we're about to do a separate piece just for the legal space, just for the personal injury law firm space, because we're one of the pioneers in helping to create and accelerate what's happening in today's legal markets with MSOs. So we're about to come out with a special piece for founders of law firms just on that. So, and then I asked all of my friends to contribute. It was the only way I felt I could do this. We've got 25 contributors to the book as well, because I think that what I wanted to have happen was that it's not just my words. It's like any type of learning. You never know. You can hear something you can hear kind of the same theme 4 times, but there's something about that person, their tone, how they approached it, the industry that they're in, that connects with you, right? And so I owe so much to our contributors who so selflessly told their stories in support of helping founders achieve what they have achieved. This is our entire ethos as a firm, is what we stand for. I just hope the book doesn't suck. Like I am so afraid that I will somehow do someone that has contributed a disservice, or some founder a disservice, that we did not put out a high quality product. That is the thing that drives my fear. And it took a lot of my wife and my team have given me the courage to put it out there, because even though I don't believe I can do this and believe in myself, I felt a duty to try to share all of this knowledge and the collective knowledge with other founders. I'm sorry to get emotional, but this is the real me.
That's fantastic. And you're honest and transparent and authentic, and you birthed something called the Owner's Manual, right? So it's a big deal. So congratulations on that. Seth, I would love your advice. I love helping 2 groups of people. One's that recent college graduate as they try to navigate their first post-college or even post-high school professional job. What advice would you have for them as they do that?
It's not even my advice, but some of it is. Listen, I think it's really important that you develop a skill or a trade. So actually, I say this to even kids that don't want to go to college. That's okay, kids. go become an HVAC technician or a refrigeration technician or an electrician. Like you do not have to go to college. You can take this trade anywhere. AI is not going to displace the skilled trades. So I think we sometimes put too much emphasis
100%.
right on college. What I would tell many kids is to study accounting if they can. We don't make enough accountants. Always going to have a job. And by the way, and I learned this later, accounting is the language of business. And so, if I could encourage any young people that are getting ready to go to college to think about studying accounting, and it is not boring, it is logic, it is, you will really gain a true understanding of business. That's not the answer to your question, but or not what you asked. Sorry. Any young person coming out of college, listen, it's okay to make some mistakes, but I made mistakes for my whole career is just a series of whatever. Do not follow my path. That is what I will tell you. Don't do what I did, but try to, as quickly as you can, find the thing that you are really good at. And also think about what you need to really think about is what kind of life do you want? These are important. These are two really important things. There's a really good book by Meg Jay, The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter So Much. I would encourage every single young person coming out of school to read The Defining Decade. Meg also wrote a book about people with my condition, with trauma-related disorders. But that book is really important. And so I think that, what happens is you can run out of time. Like people say, hey, you'll figure it out. Yeah, that's true. The sooner you figure it out, the better. And what's really important is to think about what type of life do you want? What type of income do you want to make? What kind of thing kind of vision do you have for the life that you want as an adult financially? And then take a look at your skill sets, et cetera, and say, okay, what is the career path, right, that I should go down to manifest that life? And this is not a popular thing, and I'll just remind young people, they call it work for a reason.
Just to go back on the AI and electricians. So, really AI and this whole blockchain, Web3, digital asset space, it consumes so much energy in all this data center. Like electricians are going to make a ton of money because they're going to need more electricians to do the energy and the power needs.
It's not going to stop. The grid is going to electrify. Like we're going to be doing microgrids, and we're going to be doing micro nuclear reactors within data centers, and so and then the cooling that's going to be required for all these things, right? And so, but listen, the trades aren't for everyone, but but you can make a great living and
absolutely
in doing that as well.
Yeah.
So
for those that stay on the
my advice.
Yeah. So for those that stay on the corporate path, and while everyone can be a leader, those that want to be, that first time manager, be responsible for a group of people on an org chart, what's your advice when they get that promotion and start doing that role?
USA. It's not patriotic. Understand. Big U, massive U. Then an S, really big S, and then a tiny, tiny A way down there. USA. Understand. Simplify, then take action or automate. I think young people, when they first get that thing, they think they've got to go make a mark, something to prove, going too fast, step into a new situation. I've done this multiple times, right? I've stepped into many businesses I did not understand. What made me successful was taking the time to baseline, to understand the business, to understand how we make money, how we operate, what's our culture, why do we do things the way we do things, and then what are the goals? And then as you start to make change, the way that you develop the way that you develop trust and then build momentum is in the first few things you do, you want to simplify the work. This basically means taking actions that make things better for everyone, whether that's for the customer, for the employees, et cetera, so that everyone can say, oh, that's really interesting. That thing that you just had us did, it improved the top line, the bottom line, our operations. We took work out of the system. As you start to then do those things, you start to build trust, where then you can start to kind of speed up, right? So kind of slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so it's to really slow down, right? Not be a bull in a china shop, not have that chip on your shoulder, take the time, even if you have a vision or you've got preconceived notions, be curious, get to know people, get to understand things. And then as you take steps, right, make sure that those are simple things that improve the quality of the business. That builds trust, and then you can build momentum from there. But just slow down.
I love that. Seth, I'm honored that you came on the Corporate Couch with me. Your shitty accomplishments, but whatever you want to say about them. But not many of my guests have run a $2 billion organization and have grown to heights you have grown. And I just appreciate you. I'm grateful. And, during our conversation, it just made me think that I think all really the greatest leaders are coaches. So I would put you in that category. So thank you again.
It's my pleasure. We'll talk soon. See you, Jeff.
Talking to Seth, I think it had a lot of, I don't know if out of all the episodes, Joe, we've done, it had all bases. It's like humorous, funny, and heavy moments. So many things stood out to me with Seth. Besides, he played college basketball and he was 6'8" at 12 or 13 years old. And he had no coordination. I think he was 80 inches and zero coordination, I think he said, in when he was 12 or 13. But that was the first decision he made. We didn't get into it, but he had a very traumatic childhood. But then, a constant, I kept saying he had great accomplishments or something like that, and he was like, no, they were shitty accomplishments.
Yeah, he really didn't want to talk about that.
No, but he was so uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, he's so uncomfortable with it, he doesn't want to pull it up in an interview that's supposed to be about him.
Right, but but the thing with his accomplishments are, like, not many guests or people run a $2 billion division of a company. He so many different 70 acquisitions. He ran the division that was in 80 countries, but he was still carrying some deep pain from I'll say childhood trauma. But it was just, I don't know, it was just a fantastic interview for me in terms of just listening to him and talking about how high performers have their own internal struggles. Like we talked about in the interview, he looked like the picture perfect. You look at his LinkedIn, his bio, what he's done. You're saying, like, God, this guy has done everything. But he just had some internal demons. But, I also love that, he took some huge pay cut, 70% pay cut, so he can live in the same city as his wife. Well, that was a good call. But we've seen that constantly.
We've seen that a few times.
He was at Apache, the company, and he said he knew nothing about stock options. So he had a bunch of stock options that went from $10 to $100, but he didn't buy them or something like that. He could have. He said he probably could have retired then.
But that's a common thing that we've had a lot of, is people go into a business that they know nothing about. They start a new business of something that they know nothing about, and they remember with it. They say, well, I guess I'll learn.
Yeah.
It takes that kind of mentality to frankly, to have the qualifications to be on the corporate couch.
Yeah. And then, like 99% of our guests, he had no idea what he wanted to do for his career. He had zero plans to go into business. He was going to play professional basketball in Europe, and then become a college coach, right? And he said his entire business career was basically unplanned. And he also got rejected to go into the CIA, him and his buddy. So there you go. I thought that was interesting. But I think he's worked on himself immensely, and he's doing things with Samson Partners. He thinks, a lot of it is being, great leaders are coaches. And I think that's, he actually became the coach, just wasn't basketball. Now he's just coaching founders to help them succeed.
Yeah, I think we haven't had very many guests on the show that have come from so far behind as he has, and then gone so much farther ahead as he has, without knowing exactly how they were going to do it, or if they were going to do it. They just got their feet wet and did it. but still he seems like he's carrying some baggage that he would admit to us, but he's not crazy. Matter of fact, he's not crazy about talking about himself at all. And that was interesting. Matter of fact, that's something perhaps to be admired in him, because here he goes on an interview show to talk about himself, and he says, "Well, the last thing I want to do is talk about myself." Right. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. He also talked a lot about learning through failure, and if any of our guests have learned through failure, man, this is the candidate for it, because of all of the stuff that he's had to carry on in his life. That's something that I think we need to teach children. We need to teach them that failure isn't actually failure as much as it is an opportunity to learn. And yeah, it sounds cliche and it sounds like your dad talking or something like that. But that's really true. That's one of the reasons why you go out for sports, is to learn how to fail, or learn what it's like, or learn how to deal with failure, or learn what you can learn from failure. So I thought that was interesting. It was an extremely interesting interview. It went all over the place. I could listen to it again and probably come up with even more about it. But I was really fascinated by his life.
One of the most fascinating career journeys, life stories, really, that we've had on the podcast. So,
yeah,
Joe, what's going on? We're recording here in December. What's happening in your life right now?
Well, what's happening in my life is, I've been telling these jokes at the end of every show, and my girlfriend told me that I need to stop telling the jokes.
Why is that?
And well, I don't know. She just maybe it's a control issue for her or something like that. One of the things I said to her was, I said, "How can I stop doing it?" And she said, "Whatever means necessary." And I said, "No, it doesn't."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.